And we're back on our Newsmaker show this morning, now joined by Dr. John Robshaw, Dr. Ismail Mehr, and St. James CEO Bryan O'Donovan. We're going to go till 9:15 with the doctors and the CEO. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning.
You're welcome. Good morning, Bryan.
Thank you for having us. Dr. Robshaw, due to his schedule, could not make it, so it's myself and Bryan O'Donovan.
Okay, good to know. Dr. Ismail Mehr, Bryan O'Donovan, where do we start? More and more cases in the Canisteo Valley area. We had a bunch more just announced yesterday. Your thoughts, Dr. Ismail Mehr?
I think it's expected. Remember, this virus, and I've shared multiple times how fast it transmits. So there's reasoning behind why the president and the governors of all the states have asked for social distancing, and I think we're getting there. So for me, this was expected, and I expect the numbers to increase in the next few days. And you have to remember, the increase doesn't mean all doom and gloom. 20% of those people get very sick, and that's what we're trying to avoid. But the numbers are definitely going to continue to increase in the area for a little bit.
Bryan O'Donovan, your thoughts on the increase?
As Dr. Mehr says, somewhat expected. Right now, the last count I had, Bryan, we had 92 positives in Steuben County. What's concerning is we're still almost doubling, outpacing the other 6 counties with the exception of Monroe County and Tompkins. So Steuben County is extremely high up on the list. I have calls every morning with the other CEOs in other counties, and some of them are a third of what Steuben County is. So, obviously very concerned. We're seeing patients come in every day and testing every day. Every day we have had for the last 21 days a positive COVID patient that is tested here. So, we're certainly in the thick of things. I don't see an end anytime soon at this point. I don't know the projection models, Bryan. I've seen some from Monroe County, but not for Steuben County. So it's really hard to say how far through this we are.
Bryan O'Donovan, CEO at St. James, the old Canisteo Street Hospital location. Have you heard any calls? Have you had any calls from Albany yet, from the governor's office, about the possibility of reopening the old Canisteo Street location for possibly Rochester patients or patients from elsewhere?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Bryan. So let me kind of talk a little bit about what's in that hospital. The majority of the things in the hospital have been moved of what we have taken into the new hospital. There's only about 20 beds that are left over, and then there's some other clinical equipment. One of the challenges with whomever decides to commission it, if they do, that clinical equipment may not interface with whatever IT infrastructure they decide. The governor is aware that 411 Canisteo Street is available, as well as Congressman Tom Reed. We spoke with him about this. So they are aware that it could be commissioned. St. James Hospital, U of R, does not own that facility. So those would have to be discussions through Trinity Health System, who is the owner of the property. As you've probably heard throughout newscasts and that type of thing, hotels, the state DOH is also really looking at potentially filling unused hotels for COVID-positive patients. But from my conversations, I have not had any direct conversations about 411 Canisteo Street.
What is the patient census like in the new hospital?
So it's been pretty steady. We've been very busy for the most part since we opened our doors. And we have about, I would say, I don't want to get into specific numbers, about a third of our patients right now are COVID positive on our floor.
Wow. Talking with St. James CEO Bryan O'Donovan and Dr. Ismail Mehr, the anesthesiologist. Dr. Ismail Mehr, you're a big player in this COVID-19 situation locally because you're an anesthesiologist. Is most of your work done at the hospital, Ismail Mehr, or do you go out to doctors' offices? Do you make house calls ever?
No, so Bryan, I'm based here at the hospital. I'm have training in critical care as well. So we have a a step-up unit that can be converted into an ICU. All our COVID patients that come into the hospital initially, the COVID team also sees them and works along with the hospitalists here in the initial management of some of their respiratory conditions and whatnot. And then if for some reason they do get sicker as the disease can progress quite rapidly, I'm here to help do some of the emergency interventions that are needed. So no house calls, and especially in the time of social distancing, I think even if a primary care doctor did do house calls, it probably wouldn't work out well right now. So, yep, I'm right here at St. James, part of an amazing team across the board from nurses, technicians, other doctors, and we're doing very well here in terms of, I have to remind everyone the small community rural hospitals aren't set up for pandemics, and I have to say that we're really, really proud of how we have been handling this thing, and I sense the community has been very proud and happy and pleased to see how we're doing things.
Dr. Ismail Mehr, when you work in the hospital, as far as your work with the ambulance crews that come in goes, is it the St. James COVID-19 team that gives advice and training to the different fire departments, ambulance crews, or is that done by the state? How does that work?
So, obviously we work for our COVID-19 transfers, and almost all our transfers to outside facilities, be it COVID or something else, is always done by the Hornell Fire Department. And, they're amazing. They're full-time. And they're well-trained. They know how to handle such patients, how to handle contagious diseases and whatnot. In terms of any other of the EMS systems in the area, I think, that's probably a better question for Frank Brzezowski, the chief of the fire department, because I'm sure, I know he does a lot of training for other volunteer fire departments in the area, and they look to him for guidance. But from our standpoint, we work in tandem. The phone call is made when a patient's not doing well, requires more advanced care, and we get the patient ready, and they receive the patient, and they go up there. So I would say, give a shout out in the community to your EMS providers, your firemen, your policemen in the area, because they're really going in the front line. When you talk about home calls, it's our police officers and our firemen from EMS. They're doing some of the 911 calls, and they're going in blind. At least we know what we're getting when we're here at the hospital. So thank you to all those men in blue and the men in red at the fire department.
On that topic, I saw on Facebook yesterday, and I did a story on it this morning, that there's going to be more rallying from the community in terms of people going up to the new St. James Hospital and turning their headlights on. I believe it's this Friday night, tomorrow night at 7:15 p.m. Did you see that, Dr. Mehr, Bryan O'Donovan, that they're going to be doing that? They're calling this one Friday Night Lights?
Yeah, so I saw this. So again, our staff, our doctors, nurses, what an extraordinary job that they have been doing. We know that this is a marathon. Every single day they come in with just fantastic attitudes, ready to care for this community. So I want to get that out of the way. They are just extraordinary. We're lucky to have them. Secondarily, on Friday night, I was actually home with my wife and my kids. That I haven't gotten home very much lately. And I got these text messages. I think one was actually from Dr. Mehr. One was from some other staff. And, it definitely brought a tear to my eye to the support the community provides on a Friday night to drive up to a hospital to support their local community hospital was absolutely phenomenal. So, and it doesn't stop there. We have businesses, individuals, community residents that are coming and dropping off, whether it's supplies, buying our staff, our doctors, our nurses, lunches, sending us just nice well wishes. So, we're all in this together, and this community has just been stellar. So, I want to thank the community. It goes a really long way when they take the time to come up here and honk their horns and turn on their lights, and that the folks inside here know that they're right in the front of their minds. So.
Talking with St. James CEO Bryan O'Donovan and Dr. Ismail Mehr this morning on Newsmaker on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Dr. Rob Shaw was not able to make this Newsmaker. Last time we were on with Dr. Rob Shaw, he talked about how the worst case scenarios that end up in the ER at the New St. James Hospital often get sent up to Strong. How's that going? Is that still the case? I guess that question for Dr. Ismail Mehr.
Yeah, Brian. So, if they're patients on COVID-19, many of them do fairly well. The ones, as we know, many are asymptomatic, and then others get sick enough that require hospitalization. People who are hospitalized are usually people who come in who have low oxygen readings, who are what we call hypoxic, short of breath. Their oxygen levels are low, so they need to be admitted and given supplemental oxygen to help them. So those are the patients that absolutely fit the criteria for being hospitalized. Just because you have COVID-19 does not mean you have to be in a hospital. It means you have to be quarantined, of course. And then of those people who are hospitalized, some of them, the disease progresses fairly fast where they cannot sustain their breathing on their own. They go into what we call respiratory failure. Those patients do require to be intubated where a breathing tube has to be placed. Also, certain IV lines have to be placed, and there's large veins in their neck known as the jugular vein. And at the moment, there's capacity at the University of Rochester at Strong Hospital in Highland. So, of course, that's the best place for them to go at the moment. They have a full team there, and they have beds, and they have a full-fledged ICU. In the event that capacity is complete up there, they do not have those beds, that will be the time where we will be keeping them here locally. We have already prepared for that. We continue to prepare for that. So, the community can rest assured that if and when that were to come, where Rochester just cannot handle more patients, we have our plans in place. I myself have critical care training, and I work with Dr. Bilal, our CMO, and the ICUs up there. So we'll be able to provide excellent care and take care of those patients here. But at the moment, like I said earlier, rural small-town hospitals aren't set up for pandemics, and we're not set up, it's always better to be at a university hospital or a tertiary center if you require ICU care. If it changes, we're prepared, we're ready. We're prepared for the worst and hope for the best, and we're getting everyone up to Rochester that needs to be there right now.
This next question is for either Dr. Ismail Mehr or St. James CEO Bryan O'Donovan. On the topic of quarantine violators, we hear a lot about that from Steuben County Public Health Nurse Darlene Smith. She'll put out a statement, and not naming names, but she'll pretty much scold the unnamed patient in the press release, wondering, does the hospital ever get notified, or has the hospital had to notify if someone walks out of St. James or anything like that?
I'm sorry, Brian.
You didn't understand the question. The question is, have you had to deal with any people who break the quarantine, someone who's under quarantine, or maybe someone who just gets bored and walks out of the hospital, or someone how has St. James been involved at all in hearing about or notifying the county on people who are breaking the quarantine, or is that done by the family members of those who are breaking the quarantine?
I think it's a combination of all, but yes, if we have a COVID-positive patient or a known COVID-positive patient to this institution that were to AMA or to leave this facility, our first call would be to the Department of Health, and probably second call would be to the local police department, because it's our responsibility to keep this community safe.
Guessing that some of these COVID-19 patients are incredibly obvious to you. You can spot them when they walk in, I'm guessing. Does it ever turn out that someone comes into St. James who does not have a lot of obvious symptoms but still has COVID-19?
So, that's a good question. I mean, not everyone walks in, short of breath, gasping for air. Many of the people who have come in, they've had some, first of all, we're screening people who fit the criteria, that need to be seen. As you know, we're advising people to call the ER, call their primary care physicians to get screened that, maybe they can be taken care of some way else, if it's a non-emergency problem. And we shared that, I think, previously with you. So obviously they've been already pre-screened, but a lot of times by their primary care doctors or of some sort that, hey, come on in, be it COVID or not. Most of the patients who do come in have some symptoms of flu-like, symptoms. They may have some shortness of breath. So we obviously will work them up for COVID and do their testing. Some come in quite much sicker, really sick. And obviously we suspect we have a high suspicion of COVID, and we start managing them that way as well. There have been some cases, and some we've seen that come in with the gastrointestinal symptoms, some GI symptoms, upset stomach, diarrhea, vomit, and a high-grade fever. Again, they do get tested. I mean, our ER, Dr. Rob Shaw and Jack Florio, our physician assistant who run the ER, they have a whole protocol there, and they could much better explain this than I can. But there's a wide range of symptoms out there. They do an excellent job going through the criteria and test them. And I will say most of the people they have a high suspicion for coming through the ER have been positive, so that they know what they're looking for and what to do there.
Bryan, I think what's scary about this virus is, and you've watched the news outlets, is you could be completely asymptomatic, carry this thing, transmit it to multiple other people, and never even know it. That's why this social distancing is so important. We could have patients that come in, and this is exactly why we're masking everyone. We have no idea who is COVID positive. If they do have symptoms, of course, we test. But that's why we're taking these precautions for our staff and also for our other patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I was focusing, like you asked me about symptoms, but the majority of people out there are asymptomatic. And I think that's a really important point for people to take home.
Wondering, Dr. Ismail Mehr, for those who could have COVID-19 but are not obviously symptomatic, symptom-ridden, I suppose you could say, how would they have any idea that they need to be checked out?
They don't. That's the scary part. There's no way they know. If you could be in Wegmans walking by, one of your classmates from high school they haven't seen in years, keep walking, wave to him. He may have it, and he doesn't even know it. This is where people who compare this to the flu and compare this to other things, and I've seen this creeping back again now. They don't understand that it's the asymptomatics are probably spreading it more so than the symptomatics. The symptomatics are, even if they're not getting tested or they don't feel good, most people stay home when they're not feeling good. It's the people who feel great, no problems. They're the ones who, and I'm not blaming them, I'm just saying if they're out and about, they're doing it. That's why we have these drastic measures where everything's shut down. And one thing I just wanted to add is there's also been a lot of comparison and questioning of the mortality rates, and I've seen this going around the community and discussions that, it really doesn't kill that many people. And many of these things, I would ask, my good friends in New York City and Detroit and New Orleans hospitals, I wish I could get one of them on the phone because I talk to them and text back and forth of the body bags that are being brought out of those hospitals. Right now in Rochester, they brought in, I don't remember which hospital, 2 refrigerator trucks because the morgues are full. So, yeah, if you want to compare this thing, people's cause of death to other things and they just happen to be COVID positive, it's not the right assumption. If COVID-19 leads to systemic failure, systemic things go on, and when someone dies, they always die of respiratory failure, cardiac arrest. You don't call it they died of cancer, they died of the flu on your death certificate, but it's the illness that led to the final process, the physiological process that killed you. So trust me, this thing does kill, and it kills fast. But again, not to create panic, it's out of there's 20% are hospitalized, 20% don't do very well, and the mortality rate's around 2%, 3%. But it's adding up fast if you don't stop these asymptomatic people from walking around. That's the important thing is the numbers will keep increasing. We don't have a medicine for this. We don't have a vaccine, and we need to just social distance right now.
Hey, Bryan, to put this in perspective, I think, New York City, as we know, is a 5-hour drive, maybe 6. New York City and New York State right now have more confirmed cases than any country in the world. So just think about that for a second. And I think, it's so important that right now that people protect themselves and protect their families.
Speaking with St. James CEO Bryan O'Donovan and Dr. Ismail Mehr, I'm glad you brought up the question about padding the statistics. A commentator, more than one commentator, has speculated that the deaths are being, the statistics are being exaggerated, that somebody gets COVID-19 and dies, but they had a lot of other things wrong with them. And last night during President Trump's coronavirus panel press conference, one of the reporters asked Dr. Birx that very question. What do you say to the commentators? And Dr. Birx replied that are saying that the statistics are being exaggerated on the deaths of COVID-19, that it's not necessarily the COVID-19 that killed them. And Dr. Birx came right out and said they had a lot of other things wrong. This isn't her exact phrasing, but she said they had a lot of other things wrong with them, and then COVID-19 got into the mix, and then they died. COVID-19 is probably the biggest factor in their death. Your thoughts on that statement from Dr. Birx that I paraphrased there, Dr. Ismail Mehr?
Yeah, so I did not last night get a chance to watch the press conference, and typically I do daily to see, hear from the task force. What I would say, it sounds like Dr. Birx is saying that, yes, people have multiple other illnesses, and they come in, and then they have COVID-19, and then that leads to their comorbidities accelerating, or, the systems that have been affected leading to the death. And that's accurate. You have to think about it. If this person who has heart disease, who has COPD, who has cancer, were they to die right now, but probably not. The answer would have been no. That's a long-term illness. They got COVID-19, and now you have a whole new systemic problem, a physiological process that's shutting down your lungs, and their progression to fatal disease is much, much faster. So, again, people have to understand that COVID-19 progresses super fast, and it causes death just because you have heart disease, cancer, you had leukemia, lymphoma, diabetes, name the things out there. You weren't dying right now. You weren't going to die, I just hope people, I will just say this, and I'm very political on my talks and things. I don't bring that into it. I just say cooler minds have to prevail on both sides. It's time for the country and our community, I'll start with, to come together. If we're looking to point fingers to the left, to the right, we're not going to get there. We're not going to succeed. We have to trust our healthcare officials, trust the people who are in charge of directing us through these really difficult times, instead of trying to find out on both sides. That's my only suggestion to everyone out there. It doesn't do anyone good. We need to come together and believe the statistics, believe the things, because I'm telling you, the healthcare professional, I see this here at our hospital. I've seen young people in the 30s come through and progress super fast to the brink of death right here in St. James, and we had to do emergency maneuvers and get them to Rochester. So this thing is real.
We're down to the last minute or so, a couple minutes. I know that you have a 9:15 appointment there, Dr. Ismail Mehr and St. James CEO Bryan O'Donovan. Was there anything I did not bring up that you wanted to get in?
No, I think if you have a healthcare worker's phone number or IM or Facebook, just take a minute to thank them. It really goes a long way. And lastly, thanks again to this community for really rallying around our hospital and our doctors, nurses, and team members. So thank you.
Yeah, nothing else. Just again, thank you to everyone. They're difficult times. I know we're getting cabin fever. People want out, and at times that might play some tricks on the mind to say it's not that bad. The reason it's not that bad is because we're social distancing. The reason that you see that the White House projections of the deaths and the number of people being sick is coming down, it's not because people were in the media or our politicians or others miscalculated or were using this as an agenda. It just shows that social distancing that we've enacted, that the president's asked for us to continue, is actually bring those numbers down. Otherwise, if we go back to normal life too fast, it's going to bounce back. And it's been being seen in South Korea, Singapore, and other countries that thought that they had controlled it. They did open up, and probably rightfully so, because they didn't know that this virus, we don't know how we do, and it's bounced back. So we have other countries, other statistics to look at, and we have, and our task force that the president has set forth is taking that as guidance, and we have to trust them and follow that.
With that, we have to let Dr. Ismail Mehr and St. James CEO Bryan O'Donovan go. I want to thank you both for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's AM 14. Thank you for both coming on. Welcome back anytime, both of you, as well as Dr. Rob Shaw and anyone from the hospital. It's AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.